Chapter 3. Programs. Within the self, there are the dreamers, the individual souls who are the essential characters of the manifest reality. Within the dreamer are many latent powers whose task is to conduct his dream in myriad ways. These are the programs. Programs are living ideas. They have no reality of their own, but rather they subsist on the being of their source. There are many different types of programs, each with their own function. Some aid and abet the dreamer, some are antagonistic to him, and some are simply there to provide decoration for his experience. Programs are either internal, that is, they appear in his mental space, in the dream-sleep state even whilst awake, and some are external, meaning they appear to his senses within the world. Programs differ substantially in their power, energy, and knowledge, from those who near rival the dreamer to those who are almost negligible and invisible. Programs are coded with everything they need to perform their function for the dreamer, even if they never interact with him directly. This can include memories of entire lives that provide them with contextual knowledge. They may have been created only an hour prior, yet they may be convinced that they have lived for an age. Further to this, programs can have any information about the dreamer that they require. Even the most trivial detail of his life may be important to their functioning and can leave the dreamer wondering, how did he know that? Whilst programs do have their own thoughts and feelings, their freedom is limited to their function. Beyond the knowledge that is the utility of their existence, they have none, although, by nature, they will not question this of their own accord. How they need to interact with the dreamer as a program plays out, and then they are deleted. Even though they are none other than the dreamer from whence they came, the illusion of their own reality as a real being is also essential to their functioning, and is therefore written into every program. This is the beginning state of ignorance for programs, but it can be broken if the dreamer is lucid. Because they are the single being in the center of the dream, the different programs of one dreamer act as a unitary being, operating from within like a very intricate clockwork machine. Programs are a phenomenon of the manifest, and do not relate with the absolute. They have a natural aversion to the unmanifest written into them. When their utility has been exhausted, they are deleted and repose in the dreamer. Even if a program dies, he will not go to the absolute. His only rest comes upon deletion. Regardless of the class of program, all react negatively to being informed of their unreality. No program surpasses its origin in qualities. The dreamer is always superior to his programs, whether in strength, intelligence, beauty, power, energy, and so forth. Internal programs have a few interesting features that are not so for their external counterparts. For example, all internal programs look and sound like the dreamer. This is hard to ascertain as they generally are not seen, but if you ask them they will say, "Yes, we all look and sound like you." Beware, this sort of logic will lead internal programs down a spiral of self-inquiry, and they will end up having to be deleted. The first class of programs are known as bots. They are the most common form of program. Their function is to provide background furnishing for scenes. Whilst all programs have the capacity to appear both internally and externally, most appear more often in one category. Bots are most commonly found in the external arena. Bots are contextual programs like the furniture in a room they are built, with the design and utility of their surroundings in mind. In depth, bots can differ greatly, from a flock of birds flying overhead to a passer-by whom the dreamer may never chance to see again, to a very familiar character that one interacts with every day. It is all dependent on their utility. To walk the streets of a city is to be surrounded by bots. The goddess is the greatest actress, and to don millions of different costumes from one day to the next is not taxing for her. Bots require relatively little energy to run and have nearly no substance in them. Through the dreamers, the mother creates whomever is needed to run the script that is in play. As they are unreal entities, bots are intimately tied to their host. Bots are manifestations of the mind of the dreamer, and thus they subtly express his thoughts and feelings. They are within the room of the dreamer, and not separate from it. Therefore, if one is lucid, he can be aware of his own field in its expression in the bots around him. There is no realm that is devoid of these programs. Even the highest realms, the place where no one has to go and the place where everyone has to go, are populated in part with bots. In any realm and in any world within that realm, bots vastly outnumber dreamers. The next class of programs are the agents. As with bots, they appear in the majority of cases in the external only. The entire function of these programs is to antagonize and intimidate the dreamer. They often appear as the ministries and enforcement of the ruling groups within a realm. That is, if the world is antagonistic to the lucid self. In their role, they bring difficulty upon the dreamer and act in such a way as to undermine his conviction of his own nature, to attack his lucidity. Agents operate on dense principles that bind sleepers. They rely on the dreamer believing in the reality of his bodily existence and in the temporality of all creations, including himself. Ultimately, agents are written as a tool to test the dreamer, to have him walk through doors that he would not otherwise walk through, and, in doing so, bring him to greater conviction about reality. Whilst bots are benign programs, and agents are antagonistic, the third class of programs is the first among them that are helpful to the dreamer. They are the instructors. These programs appear both internally and externally to similar degrees, but have the qualities such that they are always perfectly placed to guide their dreamer. Taking a familiar or unfamiliar form, they are built to impart any knowledge or teach any skill that a script demands, particularly in simulations. Instructors are still unreal beings, yet they can have a breadth and depth of knowledge in areas that the dreamer himself has not had access to. Being a construction of the mother, they rest on her knowledge and share this in many interesting ways. These programs, like bots, can be written with a limitless variety of their own experiences, as their memories that are relevant to their task of instruction. Oftentimes, multiple instructors will appear in a script at one time, working with each other, using their collected programmed knowledge, and through experience and conception will combat the dreamer's old and useless ideas and replace them with new and relevant ones. Sensors are the fourth class of programs, and like agents, they work against the dreamer, but in a different manner. Appearing inside and out as needed, and very often in groups, these programs' utility is to criticize, humiliate, confuse, and harm their host. It is the case that sometimes one can only understand himself through the eyes of those that hate him. Sensors can give the dreamer this experience. They act by taking self-critical lines of reasoning to lengths that the dreamer himself never would. In doing so, these programs shed light on his shortcomings, such that they can be seen in great detail and thus be faced honestly. A dreamer may feel many things self-deprecating in nature, some with greater or lesser degrees of truth behind them. Yet few would allow such thoughts and feelings to be articulated to the extent and depth that sensors do. In this way, this class of programs is not detrimental in their purpose. Rather, though painfully, they act such that the dreamer may expose himself fully to those sentiments that, without their presence, he would no doubt run from. Yet if these critiques are buried and avoided perpetually, they can do more harm to him than the sensors, though they be relentless. It must be said that these programs, if left unchecked and unrecognized, can wreak havoc on their source, even having the ability to curse and afflict the dreamer in many unpleasant ways. The next type of program are the reflections. Due to their nature, these programs never appear in the external world, unless through special effort. This is because they are constructions based on other dreamers that the source dreamer knows. They appear only as entities in the mental space, thus the representation never normally appears alongside the real. These programs are more complicated in their purpose than bots or agents, as they act as elements in scripts that play out between two or more dreamers. Thus, it is circumstantial whether a reflection will be helpful, harmful, or harbour any other sentiment towards the dreamer. Reflections may be widely different from their counterpart in certain ways, yet these are always inherent to their utility. Crucially, the reflection is named so because it is built on a known entity. Thus, the aspects of the dreamer that are necessary are always present. For example, a reflection may share a story with the dreamer. It may not be factual, but the inherent conflict that the story arouses may be crucial, and thus the interaction is still fruitful. As with instructors, these programs are written with the exact knowledge and experience required to work on the dreamer, whether that means mediating the relationship between the reflection's real person and the dreamer, or extracting an intimate detail from the dreamer without ever having to be in the same room. Finally, there are the powers. Any movement in the manifest reality can be isolated into a program. The goddess operates all functions within herself, yet she can separate any of these and allow the dreamer to interact with them. For example, the winds and the rains within a dream are governed by the one who controls everything, but their functioning can be isolated as its own program, allowing direct interaction with the governing entity of the weather systems. Again, fortune itself can be spoken to, or food or any such idea can be interacted with as an isolated program. In this way, the dreamer can interact with the back end of the dream and manipulate it. This principle can be applied to any other operation within the dream, such that the movement of fire, the waters, and such like, all can be seen as individual programs and can be interacted with, whereas normally they would rest within the goddess. Further down from this, there are programs that are of a very specific and minor nature. Programs whose utility is very narrow, and thus are only necessary for a short while. For instance, a program to remind the dreamer to do something or other. Such a program can appear and run invisibly in the background of a dream, only being called upon when it is needed, and when the reminder is given, it is deleted. Many of these programs operate in the back end of the dream without the dreamer particularly noticing them, and in the back end they simply merge in the great fluidity of the dream. Nevertheless, they do exist, and awareness of them can give the dreamer great control over his dream. Energy is required for all programs to run, as they are not themselves real individual entities with their own connection back to the source of energy, that is, the mother. They rely on the energy of their source dreamer to function. Such is also the case with power. As this is so, the dreamer can affect the energy of programs by his will if he is lucid, raising and lowering as he desires, using his own power. Programs can also use the power of the dreamer to effect change in his dream if they are so inclined. To create a program, it must be written. That is, it must be drawn out of the dreamer and encoded with its utility. This process is known to everyone but is seldom reflected on. Take, for example, rehearsing a mock conversation with another dreamer in the mind. Here, a reflection is written, conversed with, and then the program and the room it was created in are both destroyed so swiftly and naturally that it is not thought of in this manner. The dreamer needs to be aware of the programs that operate both in his internal space, but also in the external dream space. If he is not, then he is at their mercy, and they will function around him rather than for him. A simple test in writing programs is to address the field and ask it to remind you regarding a simple task in the near future. Let this simple program run in the background of the dream, and, if written with conviction, it will no doubt work, as it was programmed at the right time. A more involved program is a writing dream. If you want someone to have a dream, good, bad, or specific, you can write such a program and send it on its way. It will have its effect and be released. Power will be required to do so, and again conviction in its reality is essential. Greater, again, is writing a program to affect the weather. This certainly can be done, but not without significant lucidity. If one is confident enough, then he can write a program that has control over the weather in his dream. He need only have complete conviction in its ability, then, addressing this program, he can ask it to change the skies how he likes. If done correctly, one can stop the winds and the rains at his will. Such is the depth of the back end of the dream.